Over the course of Melee's lifespan, defensive strategies have received numerous innovations. One of the most notable examples occurred about a decade ago, when a Sheik player named Amsa popularized a technique that is now known as an Amsa tech. Amsa teching involves using ASDI down alongside a tech input to quickly become actionable after being attacked on the ground. As time went on, Amsa teching would prove to be the best option in plenty of situations, making it a staple in high-level play. In my last two YouTube videos, I broke down the science behind an Amsa tech, also known as an ASDI down tech. As I explained in those videos, the first step toward performing an ASDI down tech is to perform something called a floor hug. Floor hugging refers to the act of causing floor collision on the frame after hit lag through the use of ASDI down. Additionally, there's a stronger form of floor hugging called a TDI Floorhug. These utilize trajectory DI in order to lower the trajectory of an attack and floor hug until even higher percents. During a TDI floor hug, your analog stick will always be pointed horizontally, which means a tech input will yield a tech roll. This happens to synergize well with floor hugging. Because a tech roll prevents your character from flying off stage during its animation, it can allow you to survive attacks until unbelievably high percents. Needless to say, floor hugging opens the door for some powerful defensive techniques. But while ASDI down techs and tech rolls have been known about for quite some time, there's a third use for floor hugging that has only risen to prominence in recent years. This third use is known as a slide-off. A slide-off is an option that can only be performed when your character is near the end of a stage or platform. Whenever this is the case, a slide-off is usually the best option in the game. Unlike the other techniques that I've shown you, slide-offs don't involve teching at all. Instead, they look to incur knockdown. Once this happens, your character's hit stun and vertical knockback will drop to 0. Then, their horizontal knockback will push them off stage. It is possible for your character to incur as little as 2 frames of lag during this process, 1 frame of knockdown and 1 frame of being airborne. After that, they will be actionable. Because a slide-off causes your character to become actionable so quickly, your opponent will usually still be stuck in their attack animation by the time you're done. This allows you to capitalize by either punishing them or resetting the neutral game to a more favorable position for yourself. Lately, slide-offs have forced Melee players to tread cautiously when dealing with an opponent who's near the end of a stage or platform. What was once viewed as a vulnerable position is now the perfect opportunity to perform a slide-off. Although slide-offs might seem straightforward, there is an unbelievable amount of strategy that goes into them. In this video, I'll be going over some of the hidden ways to get the most out of slide-offs. If you're a fan of this kind of Melee content, please don't forget to subscribe. Before we get into the more advanced strategies, let's start with the golden rule of slide-offs, which is that you should always perform them with a TDI floor hug rather than a regular floor hug. Basically, this means that in addition to using the C-stick for ASDI down, you should also use the analog stick for trajectory DI. To understand why TDI is essential during a slide-off, let's take a look at a common scenario in which you might look to perform one. In this clip, Jigglypuff up-throws Fox, who then tech rolls to the right side of the platform. Now the Jigglypuff player will surely consider either a back air or an up air to punish the vulnerable frames of Fox's tech roll. These attacks have trajectories of 44 degrees and 90 degrees respectively, which means that only back air will give Fox horizontal knockback. This matters because horizontal knockback is necessary in order to slide off. To see what I mean, watch what happens when Fox only inputs ASDI down when he's hit by these attacks. After being back aired, Fox is able to floor hug, then slide off just fine on the next frame. However, after being up-aired, Fox remains in knockdown, as this attack doesn't give him horizontal knockback. To fix this, we have to use TDI to modify the trajectory of Jigglypuff's up-air. By pointing the analog stick perpendicularly, we're able to change Jigglypuff's up-air's trajectory to 72 degrees. The C-stick will remain pointed down so we can ASDI down as well. Now Jigglypuff's up-air causes horizontal knockback, which allows us to perform a slide-off. Because vertical attacks like Jigglypuff's up-air are so common, you should always TDI during slide-offs. But while this is important to know, slide-offs aren't as simple as performing the same TDI floor hug inputs as usual. Up until now, I've told you that TDI floor hugs are performed by pointing the analog stick perpendicular to your trajectory and the C-stick straight down for ASDI. While it is true that you would normally TDI floor hug this way, slide-offs have unique traits that can make it so that neither of these inputs are correct. This will be the focus of our first few advanced strategies. The first advanced strategy will show you the best location to point your C-stick during a slide-off. This strategy involves the biggest secret there is to know about slide-offs, which is that most characters' ECBs are to the side of the platform during certain frames of their tech roll and get-up roll animations. If you've watched my video on ledge dashing, you'll know that an ECB is an orange diamond that determines when your character collides with surfaces such as the floor. As your character cycles through different animations, their ECB can shift horizontally or vertically, and they can even change in size. In this case, we're concerned with how ECBs behave during tech rolls and get-up rolls, as these animations will often precede a slide-off. It is important to know that every character has one tech roll animation for each direction and 2 get-up roll animations for each direction, which gives us a total of 6 animations to consider. To learn about the ECB issue that I mentioned, let's revisit the clip I showed you a moment ago in which Jigglypuff up-throws Fox. In this clip, Fox performs a forward tech roll which lasts 40 frames. For the first 20 frames, Fox is intangible. Then, Fox becomes vulnerable starting on frame 21. On frames 21 through 30, Fox's x-axis position is at the very end of the platform, which is exactly where you'd expect it to be. But watch what happens starting on frame 31. Fox shifts a microscopic distance to the right, which means he is technically to the side of the platform. It is normally impossible to tell that this happens, but by taking a close look at Fox's ECB, the shift is visible. Fox then goes on to spend the rest of his forward tech roll to the side of the platform. The significance of Fox's ECB being to the side of the platform comes into play when he is attacked. During frames 21 through 30 of his forward tech roll, Fox is able to ASDI straight down and cause a floor hug because his ECB is above the platform. However, once Fox's ECB shifts to the side of the platform on frame 31, ASDIing straight down will no longer work. As you can see, Fox fails to land on the platform and instead goes into airborne hit stun. Luckily for Fox, there's still a way for him to floor hug once his ECB has shifted. This is done by pointing the C-stick diagonally downward towards the platform. By doing so, Fox will not only ASDI down, but also to the side so that he can end up above the platform once again. Out of curiosity, I ended up testing every character's tech rolls and get-up rolls to see exactly when their ECBs shifted to the side of the platform. It turned out that every character has to be aware of this issue coming up on at least some of these animations. To be clear, it is fine to ASDI straight down when your character's ECB is above the platform, but you'll have to ASDI diagonally whenever it isn't. Otherwise, you won't receive a slide-off. The next slide-off strategy has to do with your analog stick inputs, which determine your trajectory DI. This strategy has to do with the fact that horizontal TDI has an advantage over diagonal TDI when it comes to slide-offs. Normally, it is best to point the analog stick perpendicularly in order to influence the attack's trajectory by as much as possible. For example, if you are being back-aired by Jigglypuff, the best choice would be to point the analog stick diagonally. On the other hand, if you're being up-aired by Jigglypuff, you'd want to point the analog stick horizontally. These inputs modify the trajectory of each of these attacks by 18 degrees. When it comes to slide-offs, however, pointing the analog stick horizontally comes with an arbitrary advantage. This advantage has to do with the fact that it is often best to perform a fastfall directly after performing a slide-off. For example, if you slide off from a platform, you may want to fastfall in order to touch the ground as soon as possible. Similarly, if you slide off at the end of the stage, you'll probably want to fastfall to grab the ledge faster. When you slide off with horizontal TDI, you're able to simply roll the analog stick downward to perform a fastfall. Because this motion isn't obstructed in any way, there's nothing stopping you from fastfalling frame perfectly. However, when you slide off with diagonal TDI, you have to roll the stick upward, then back downward. Since this motion takes longer to perform, it ends up delaying your fastfall by a couple of frames. Because of the conflict I just described, it is best to slide off with the analog stick pointed horizontally. However, you have to be aware that this won't give you optimal TDI against moves with diagonal trajectories. For example, horizontal TDI will only modify Jigglypuff's back air by about 9 degrees rather than the full 18. While this will reduce the percent you're able to floor hug until, it is the only way to fastfall frame perfectly after a slide off. Between these last two strategies, we now know where to point the analog stick and C-stick during a slide-off. Now that we've gotten those things out of the way, let's move on to some other slide-off strategies. The third strategy is to be aware that while fast-falling after a slide-off is often the best option, doing so comes with a hidden risk. The risk I'm referring to has to do with performing an unintentional smash DI input. To see what I mean, let's say you're tech rolling to the right side of a platform with the intention of performing a slide-off. Your analog stick is pointed horizontally for TDI. Then, after getting hit by your opponent, you roll the analog stick downward to fastfall. The problem is that once your analog stick enters the quadrant, the game will interpret this as a smash DI input if you're still in hit lag. If this SDI input happens when your character is at the end of the platform, it will cause them to shift off the platform, at which point your slide off will backfire. To avoid having this happen, you have to make sure not to input your fastfall too early. For this reason, it helps to know that during a slide-off, you can't fastfall until the 4th frame after hit lag anyway. This is because you will always incur a frame of knockdown followed by 2 fall frames that don't let you fastfall. A fastfall can then take place on the 3rd frame off stage. Since you can't fastfall until the 3rd frame off stage, or the 4th frame after hit lag, there's no reason to rush your fastfall input. For example, a fastfall can be buffered as early as the knockdown frame, as fastfalls have a 3-frame buffer. However, I don't recommend doing this because of how close your fastfall will be to your hit lag frames. If you were to mistime this fastfall by even a frame, you would accidentally input SDI and cause your slide off to fail. Instead, it is better to time your fastfall for a few frames later. This way, you still give yourself a good chance to fastfall frame perfectly while also making sure that the SDI issue doesn't come up. The next strategy is knowing when to perform a technique called a smash DI slide off. A smash DI slide off is a slide off variation that should be considered whenever your character is near the end of a stage or platform, but not quite at the very end. An example of this situation can be seen in this clip, in which Fox techs in place near the middle of the platform. At this percent, Fox is unable to travel far enough horizontally to slide off after being up-aired by Jigglypuff, even with his analog stick pointed horizontally. This leaves Fox vulnerable to being attacked again. Luckily for Fox, there is still a way for him to make it off the platform in this situation, and that is to perform an SDI slide off. This is done by resting your analog stick in the neutral position up until your character gets hit. Then, when your character enters hit lag, jam your analog stick to the side. This will cause your character to SDI toward the end of the platform during hit lag, at which point their knockback is able to carry them off. As you can see, Fox is able to escape what would have been a deadly situation thanks to this SDI input. The next strategy is knowing that certain attacks require you to perform unique inputs in order to receive a slide off. Among the viable characters, there are 2 moves in particular that you should know about. The first attack is Marth's up tilt, which is notorious for being able to send Marth's opponent in the reverse direction. This comes in handy for Marth whenever his opponent tech rolls to the end of a platform in the hopes of receiving a slide off. Marth can simply up tilt in response to this, causing his opponent to travel in reverse and denying their slide off. If you know that Marth has you in a position where he can threaten a reverse up tilt, you should start by DIing so that you land closer to the middle of the platform. This way you are still able to slide off in both directions. Then, if you guess correctly that Marth will reverse up tilt you, you should perform an SDI slide off in the direction he will send you. SDI is crucial for dealing with this move because you'll be starting out in the middle of the platform, so you'll usually have to bring yourself closer to the end in order to slide off. The other attack to be wary of when it comes to slide offs is Fox's up air. Fox's up air can be tricky to slide off specifically because of its first hit, which sends Fox's opponent slightly forward. To show you why this is an issue, take a close look at what happens when Fox up throws Falco, who then tech rolls to the end of the platform. If Falco points his C-stick straight down, the first hit of Fox's up air causes him to floor hug for a frame, but on the next frame he goes off the platform. This prevents Falco from floor hugging the second hit. In order to floor hug both hits, Falco has to make a slight adjustment to his C-stick inputs. Instead of pointing the C-stick straight down, Falco must point it diagonally down and towards the platform. Earlier, I advocated doing this during tech rolls and getup rolls that cause your ECB to shift off the platform, but against Fox's up air, you have to do it regardless. This is because by ASDIing diagonally, Falco makes it further inward on the platform after the first hit of Fox's up air, which lets him floor hug the second hit. In the modern era of Melee, slide-offs have already proven to be a staple, and they will likely become even more dominant as Melee continues to evolve. Hopefully this video helps you master not only the basics, but also some of the more advanced slide-off applications. If you enjoyed this video, I also recommend checking out my last 2 videos to learn more about ASDI down, the mechanic that makes slide-offs possible. Now that my series of videos on ASDI down has concluded, I'll be moving on to other topics in the future, so stay tuned.